Carter swirled a $500 glass of wine my parents drained their retirement to buy, bragging about his friendship with CEO Julian Thorne. He looked at me with pity. Seeing only an unemployed failure, he had no idea my phone was buzzing against the table with a text from Julian himself, asking me to destroy a traitor in the finance department. Ironically, that traitor was sitting right across from me, cutting his steak like he owned the world. My name is Isadora Blackwell, and as I sat at the pristine white table overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, I looked less like a guest at a celebration and more like a stain on the scenery. I am 34 years old, and according to the collective opinion of the 4 other people at this table, I have wasted every single one of those years. The sea breeze whipping through the open terrace of the Azure Coast Resort in the Hamptons carried the scent of salt, expensive perfume, and, to my trained nose, the unmistakable stench of financial desperation. This was supposed to be a joyous occasion, the 40th wedding anniversary of my parents, Richard and Mary. Instead, it felt like a hostage situation where the ransom was paid in forced smiles and maxed-out credit cards. I adjusted the collar of my charcoal gray blouse. A sensible, off-the-rack garment I had purchased 3 years ago. It was clean, pressed, and entirely unmemorable, much like how my family viewed my career. When people asked what I did, I told them I was a freelance strategy consultant. To my parents, that was code for unemployed but too proud to ask for a loan. To my sister Lorelei, it meant I was a tragic figure who sat in coffee shops nursing a single latte for 4 hours while typing aimlessly on a laptop. They did not know that my hourly consultation rate started at $3,000, or that the last strategy I devised had saved a biopharmaceutical company from a hostile takeover by a Chinese conglomerate. I preferred it this way. Silence was a weapon, and I had been sharpening mine for a decade. "You are not even listening, Isadora," my mother snapped, her voice tight with the anxiety that comes from wearing a dress that cost $800 when your checking account has less than $2,000 in it. She gestured frantically toward the head of the table. "Carter is telling us about his meeting with Mr. Thorne. Show some respect." I lifted my gaze from the untouched appetizer, a single scallop drowning in foam that probably cost $40, and looked at Carter Vance, my brother-in-law, the regional chief financial officer for Omnicorp. He was a man who wore his insecurity like a neon sign. Today, he was dressed in a navy suit that was just a shade too bright, the fabric screaming for attention, paired with a watch that was too large for his wrist. He sat with his arm draped over the back of Lorelei's chair, claiming ownership not just of her, but of the entire atmosphere. "It is fine. Mary, really," Carter said, waving a hand dismissively, though his eyes narrowed at me. "Isadora probably does not understand the complexities of corporate governance. It can be quite boring for the uninitiated." He took a sip of his whiskey, swirling the amber liquid with an affectation he must have copied from a movie. "As I was saying, Julian, that is what he insists I call him. None of that Mr. Thorne nonsense. Julian and I were on the back nine at the Liberty National Golf Club last Tuesday. Incredible view of the Statue of Liberty. He turns to me, right before he putts for a birdie, and says, 'Carter, the vision you have for the Northeast sector is exactly what Omnicorp needs. It is bold. It is aggressive. We laughed about it over drinks later.' I picked up my water glass, the condensation cool against my fingertips. I took a slow sip to hide the involuntary twitch of my lip. Julian Thorne hated golf. He famously called it a sport for men who did not know how to walk fast enough to get actual work done. Furthermore, last Tuesday, Julian was not in New Jersey at a golf course. He was in a sensory deprivation tank in a wellness clinic in Zurich. Recovering from a 20-hour negotiation with the European Union regulators, I knew this because I had approved the security detail for his trip. "That is amazing, Carter," my father beamed, his face flushed with pride, and perhaps a bit too much gin. "To think, our son-in-law, right hand to a Fortune 500 CEO. It is just that it makes all the struggle worth it." He is basically family. Dad, Lorelai chimed in, squeezing Carter's bicep. She looked beautiful, polished to perfection, but there was a brittleness to her smile that I recognized. She was working hard to play the part of the successful executive's wife. Carter says Julian is thinking of inviting us to his private island for the summer retreat. He is considering it, Carter corrected with mock modesty. Leaning forward, we had dinner at Le Bernardin 2 nights ago to discuss the logistics. Julian loves the Dover sole there. He told me. Carter, bring Lorelai. Bring the in-laws. We need real people around, not just yes men. I sliced through my scallop. 2 nights ago, Julian Thorne was hosting a fundraising gala for pediatric cancer in Chicago. He is allergic to fish. The lies were not just bold, they were sloppy. Carter was constructing a reality made of wet tissue paper, banking on the fact that my parents were too dazzled by the brand names to check the facts. And what about you, Isadora? Carter's voice shifted, dropping the jovial veneer for a tone of patronizing concern. He pointed his fork at me. Still driving that, what is it? A 10-year-old Honda? It is a Toyota, I corrected softly, and it runs fine. A Toyota, Carter repeated, letting the word hang in the air like a bad smell. He looked at my parents. You see what I mean? It is a mindset issue. Isadora is comfortable with mediocrity. In my world, in the world of Omnicorp, appearance is currency. If I pulled up to headquarters in a rust bucket like that, Julian would laugh me out of the boardroom. You have to dress for the job you want, Isadora, not the gig work you have. It gets me from point A to point B, I said, my voice level. But do you even know where point B is? Carter chuckled, looking around the table for validation. My parents offered weak, apologetic smiles. They were embarrassed by me. They were embarrassed by my lack of ambition, my refusal to marry, my silence. Look, I am just saying this because I care. You are a dreamer. Isadora, you live in this fantasy world where you think you can just drift through life without playing the game. But the real world? It is for sharks. It is for people who seize destiny, like me. He snapped his fingers loudly, a sound that cut through the murmur of the high-end dining room. A waiter appeared instantly. Another bottle, Carter commanded. The 98 Cabernet, the one I pointed out earlier. The waiter hesitated. Sir, that bottle is $550. My father gasped audibly. Carter, son, that is too much. The house wine is fine. Nonsense. Richard, Carter boomed, expanding his chest. This is your 40th anniversary. We are not drinking swill. Besides, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek, black metal card. It caught the afternoon sun, gleaming ominously. Julian gave me the corporate expense card. He told me, Carter, treat your family. You have earned it. This is on Omnicorp. Consider it a personal gift from the CEO. I watched the card land on the white tablecloth. It was indeed an Omnicorp corporate card. Specifically, a Level 3 executive card. I knew the policy manual for that card by heart because I had rewritten the compliance section 6 months ago. Level 3 cards were strictly for travel and lodging expenses directly related to client acquisition. Using it for personal entertainment, let alone a family anniversary dinner, was an immediate termination offense. It was categorized under Class A misappropriation of funds. $500 on a bottle of wine, my mother whispered, touching her pearls. She looked at Carter with adoration bordering on religious worship. Oh, Carter, you are too good to us. Only the best for the family, Carter said, winking at Lorelai. See, Isadora, this is what success looks like. It is not about saving pennies. It is about leverage. It is about having the big boss hand you the keys to the kingdom because he trusts you with his life. I stared at the black card. He was stealing. It was not a gray area. He was stealing from the very company he claimed to lead, and he was doing it with a smile. Using the theft to buy my parents' affection and belittle me in the process. He was not just a liar. He was a thief who thought he was untouchable. I reached for my phone, which was resting face down on the table. It vibrated once, a short, sharp buzz against the wood. Checking for client emails? Carter teased, pouring himself more water while waiting for the wine. Or maybe checking your bank balance to see if you can afford dessert? I ignored him and flipped the phone over. The screen illuminated with a notification from the Bloomberg Terminal app, followed by a priority alert from the Omnicorp internal governance bot. Omnicorp, OMNI, intraday alert. Stock experiencing abnormal volatility, down 0.4% in after-hours trading. Internal audit protocols activated. A second message appeared below it, this one a direct encrypted ping. Sender: J. Thorne. Message: Board vote is tomorrow at 900 hours. I need the file on the financial leak in the Northeast Division. Isadora. Bring me ahead. I looked up from the screen. Carter was currently explaining to my father how he advised Julian on the Asian market expansion strategy. He was cutting his steak with aggressive, sawing motions, his mouth moving rapidly, spewing fiction as if it were gospel. He looked so confident. He looked so safe in his bubble of arrogance. He truly believed that the world was something he could charm and bully into submission. "Is everything okay, Isadora?" Lorelei asked, her voice low. She had noticed me staring at the screen. "You look intense." "I am fine," I said, sliding the phone back into my purse. "Just reading the news. The market is a bit unstable today." "Market?" Carter laughed. A bark of a sound. "Please, Isadora, leave the market watching to the professionals, unless you have a few million invested that we do not know about." He laughed at his own joke. My parents laughed with him, a nervous, relieved sound. "No," I said, picking up my fork and looking Carter dead in the eyes for the first time that afternoon. My voice was calm, devoid of any warmth. "No millions, just watching the trends. Sometimes, things that look very stable are actually about to collapse. It is fascinating how quickly the numbers can turn against you when you least expect it." Carter paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. For a split second, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, but he shook it off instantly. "You are weird, Isadora. You know that?" he said, shaking his head. "Anyway, as I was telling Richard, Julian wants me to look into the new sustainable energy initiative." I went back to my scallop. It was cold now. I ate it anyway. The wine arrived, and the waiter began the ritual of uncorking the $500 bottle. Carter made a show of inspecting the cork, sniffing it, and nodding his approval like a king granting mercy to a peasant. My parents looked at him with tears in their eyes, so proud, so relieved that one of their daughters had married a winner. They did not see the precipice. They did not see that the man pouring their wine was not a savior, but a liability I was about to liquidate. The party was just beginning, and the wine was indeed going to be very, very expensive, but not in the way Carter thought. The sliding glass door clicked shut behind me, severing the noise of the party with the precision of a guillotine blade. The muffled sounds of laughter, the clinking of crystal, and Carter's booming voice reciting another fabricated anecdote about his importance were instantly replaced by the rhythmic, indifferent roar of the Atlantic Ocean. I walked to the edge of the limestone balcony, gripping the cold iron railing until my knuckles turned white. The wind here was sharp, carrying the bite of the coming autumn, a stark contrast to the stifling, overheated atmosphere of forced celebration inside. I reached into my clutch, not for a cigarette, but for a small, unbranded silver inhaler. I did not have asthma. It was filled with pure oxygen, a trick I had learned from a Japanese hedge fund manager before I dismantled his company for insider trading. One deep breath cleared the cortisol from the blood. 2 breaths sharpened the mind. I took 3. Inside that dining room, I was Isadora the disappointment. I was the daughter who drifted, the sister who failed to launch. But out here, in the dark, stripped of the family narrative, I was myself, and the truth of who I was would have shattered my father's heart more than my perceived failure ever could. I am not a freelance strategy consultant. That is a polite fiction I constructed to explain the erratic hours and the non-disclosure agreements. My professional title, known only to a circle of about 50 people on Wall Street and in Washington, is a crisis management architect. But in the boardrooms where fates are decided, they call me the eraser. When a corporation is bleeding out, when a CEO is caught in a scandal that could tank the stock price, or when a merger is about to turn toxic, the major shareholders do not call the police and they do not call the press. They call me. I step in. I assess the damage. I make the decisions that human beings with normal empathy cannot make. I fire the thousands to save the millions. I bury the scandals under mountains of legal precedent. I am the surgeon who cuts out the gangrene without anesthetic. And Julian Thorne, Carter's supposed best friend? Julian and I are not friends. We are war buddies. 5 years ago, Omnicorp was facing a hostile takeover by a sovereign wealth fund that would have stripped the company for parts. Julian was young, inexperienced, and panicking. The shadow board, the quiet money behind the public face of the company, brought me in. I spent 6 months living in a conference room, orchestrating a counter-strategy that was as brilliant as it was ruthless. We saved the company. In return, I did not ask for a bonus. I asked for equity and power. I own 2% of Omnicorp. To the uninitiated, 2% sounds like a rounding error. But when a company is valued at hundreds of billions of dollars, 2% is generational wealth. It is enough to buy this entire resort, demolish it, and leave the land fallow just for the view. I hold a seat on the board of directors, representing the interests of the dark pools of capital that stabilize the market. I do not report to Julian Thorne. In the hierarchy of governance, I am one of the people who tells Julian Thorne whether he gets to keep his job. I looked back through the glass. My father was laughing at something Carter said, his face red with wine and happiness. My mother was beaming. They looked so small, so fragile. I had made a choice long ago to keep this world separate from them. Richard and Mary Blackwell were good people. They were honest, hardworking, and simple in the most beautiful way. But they were easily blinded by the glare of gold. If they knew I was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, the dynamic would shift irrevocably. I would cease to be their daughter and become their bank. Every conversation would have a subtext of financial expectation. The neighbors would come knocking. The cousins we had not seen in 20 years would suddenly reappear. I wanted the one thing money could not buy. I wanted to be loved for my presence, not my utility. I wanted them to look at me and see Isadora, not a walking ATM. So I let them believe I was struggling. I let them pay for my dinners when I visited. I let them worry, because their worry was honest. It was the only honest thing left in my life. The glass door slid open, breaking my reverie. Lorelei stepped out, wrapping her cashmere shawl tighter around her shoulders. She looked exhausted. The dim light of the balcony was less forgiving than the chandeliers inside. It revealed the fine lines of tension around her eyes and the way her lipstick had started to bleed into the corners of her mouth. She did not look like the trophy wife of a high-flying executive. She looked like a woman holding her breath underwater. "You are missing the toast," Lorelei said, her voice lacking its usual brightness. She joined me at the railing, but she did not look at the ocean. She looked back at the party, as if making sure Carter was still the center of attention. "I needed air," I said, keeping my gaze on the horizon. "Carter has enough audience without me," Lorelei sighed, a ragged sound. "He is just trying to impress Dad. Isadora, you know how he is. He wants them to feel secure. He wants them to know I am taken care of." "Is that what this is?" I asked, turning to face her. "Security? Because spending $500 on a bottle of wine when you have a mortgage to pay feels less like security and more like recklessness." "We do not have a mortgage," Lorelei snapped, the defensive reflex kicking in instantly. "The house in Greenwich is almost paid off. Carter is doing incredible things. Isadora, you just do not understand the pressure he is under, the expectations." I studied her. I saw the tremor in her hand as she brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Lorelei, I know what pressure looks like, and I know what overcompensation looks like. Carter is drowning. I can see it. Why can you not? Stop it, she hissed, looking around fearfully to ensure the door was closed. Just stop it. You are always so critical. Just because you are alone, just because you have settled for a small life, does not mean you have to tear ours down. Carter is a visionary. Julian Thorne trusts him with the future of the Northeast sector. Does he? I asked calmly. Because I follow the sector reports. The Northeast is lagging. Efficiency is down 12% this quarter. That is just temporary. Lorelei waved her hand, dismissing the data she did not understand. Then, she bit her lip, her eyes darting away from mine. Besides, Carter has a plan to fix everything. A big project. It is actually why I came out here. I wanted to tell you before Dad does, so you do not freak out. A cold knot formed in my stomach. It had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. What project? Lorelei? It is an internal investment opportunity, she said, the rehearsed words flowing out rapidly. Project Omni Green. It is a closed-loop renewable energy initiative. Julian is opening it up to a select few inner circle employees before it goes public. The returns are guaranteed, 200% in 6 months. I felt the blood drain from my face. There is no such thing as a guaranteed 200% return. That is not finance. That is a fairy tale. It is real, Lorelei insisted, her voice rising. Carter showed us the prospectus. He showed us the projections. But we need liquidity to buy in. The buy-in window closes on Monday. Liquidity, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. Lorelei, where are you getting the liquidity? She hesitated. She looked down at her manicured fingernails. Carter convinced Mom and Dad they are going to leverage the house, the ancestral home in Pennsylvania. I froze. The house in Pennsylvania was not just a building, it was where we grew up. It was paid for by our grandfather's sweat and our father's 30 years at the steel mill. It was the only asset my parents had, their entire safety net, the physical embodiment of their life's work. You cannot let them do that, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Lorelei, look at me. You cannot let them mortgage the house for a scheme Carter cooked up. It is not a scheme. Tears sprang to her eyes now. Why are you so jealous? Why can you not stand the fact that Carter is trying to help them multiply their retirement? He loves them. He is doing this for us. He is doing this because he needs cash, I said, stepping closer, grabbing her arm gently but firmly. Lorelei, please, listen to me. High-yield internal projects do not ask for capital from retired steelworkers. If Omnicorp needed money, they would issue bonds. They would go to institutional investors. They would not ask your father to mortgage his house. She yanked her arm away, staring at me with a mixture of pity and anger. You are toxic. Isadora, Carter was right. You are so bitter about your own stagnation that you want to poison everyone else's success. Mom and Dad have already signed the preliminary papers. The transfer happens Monday morning, and when they are millionaires, I hope you have the grace to apologize. She turned on her heel and stormed back inside, the glass door sliding shut with a finality that felt like a prison sentence. I stood alone in the cold. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. He was going to take their house. He was going to take the roof over their heads to plug whatever hole he had dug for himself. My phone vibrated against my hip, a distinct, heavy pulse. It was the dedicated secure line. I pulled the device from my clutch. The screen was black, save for a single line of white text that required biometric authentication. I pressed my thumb against the sensor. The message decoded instantly. From Board Secretary Office, encrypted to Director Blackwell, subject, Emergency Audit Committee meeting, priority. Critical Director Blackwell. Chairman Thorne requests your immediate review of a forensic accounting discrepancy in the Northeast regional accounts. Preliminary audit shows a diversion of operational funds into unauthorized external holding companies. Estimated unauthorized outflow, $3.2 million. Internal controls were bypassed using a forged executive override. We are initiating a full lockdown of regional assets effective Monday. 0800 hours. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind with the violence of a car crash. The Northeast region, Carter's region, $3.2 million missing. The internal investment project requiring cash by Monday. The bragging about spending authority. Carter was not just a liar, he was the leak. He had been siphoning money from Omnicorp, likely to fund a gambling habit or a lifestyle he could not afford. And now that the auditors were closing in, he was trying to plug the $3 million hole with whatever cash he could scam from his own family before Monday morning. He was trying to use my father's retirement and my childhood home to pay back the money he stole from my company before I found out. He did not know I was the one coming to find him. I looked through the glass again. Carter was pouring more wine, his head thrown back in laughter. He looked like a man without a care in the world. He had no idea that the unemployed sister-in-law on the balcony held the warrant for his execution in her hand. He wanted to play the high-stakes game. He wanted to be a player in the world of Fortune 500 finance. "Fine, Carter," I whispered to the wind, pocketing the phone. "Welcome to the board." The morning sun that bathed the terrace of the Azure Coast Resort was aggressive, a blinding white glare that exposed every flaw in the world. It bleached the color from the ocean and made the dark circles under my sister's eyes look like bruises. It was 10 o'clock in the morning, time for the celebratory brunch that Carter had insisted upon. The table was laden with extravagant platters of smoked salmon, imported cheeses, and a tower of pastries that no one was eating. I sat at the far end of the table, nursing a black coffee. My head was clear, the cold rage from the night before having settled into a hard, crystalline focus. Across from me, Carter Vance was performing. He had recovered his composure from the previous night, or perhaps he had simply buried his panic under a fresh layer of bravado and cologne. He wore a crisp white polo shirt with the resort's logo, looking every inch the successful executive on a weekend retreat. But I saw the sheen of sweat on his upper lip. I saw the way his leg bounced under the table, shaking the silverware ever so slightly. He was running out of time. The audit lockdown began Monday morning. He needed the money today. "So, Richard, Mary," Carter began. Leaning forward and clasping his hands together as if in prayer, he pushed aside his untouched plate. "I stayed up late last night thinking about what we discussed, about the future, about legacy." My father, Richard, looked up from his eggs. He looked tired. The wine from last night had left him sluggish, and he seemed smaller in the harsh daylight. "It is a big step. Carter, your mother and I, that house is everything we have." "That is exactly the point." "Dad," Carter said, his voice dropping to a confidential, urgent whisper, "the house is an asset, yes, but it is a stagnant asset. It is sitting there, gathering dust, gaining maybe 2% value a year if you are lucky. Inflation is eating you alive. In 10 years, that house won't be enough to pay for a nursing home, let alone leave anything behind." He reached down to a leather portfolio by his feet and pulled out a thick, glossy document. He laid it on the table with a heavy thud. The cover bore the Omnicorp logo, a stylized, interlocking O and C in midnight blue. Beneath it, in bold letters, read, "Project Omni Green, Private Equity Allocation. Tier 1. Julian Thorne authorized this specifically for me," Carter lied, tapping the cover. "He knows I have family. He knows I want to take care of you. This isn't just an investment. Richard, it is a lifeboat. We are talking about a guaranteed return of 200% within 6 months. You put in the equity from the house, say $400,000. By Christmas, you pull out $800,000. You pay off the mortgage, you keep the house, and you have $500,000 cash in the bank. Pure profit." My mother's eyes widened. $500,000? She breathed. "Minimum," Carter said, nodding solemnly. "This is the green energy revolution. Mary, it is government-backed. It is fail-safe. But the window closes at noon today. Julian is finalizing the cap table this afternoon. But why us? My father asked, his brow furrowing. Why would a man like Mr. Thorne care about a couple of retirees in Pennsylvania? Carter sighed, a masterclass in feigned frustration. Because he trusts me, Dad, and because I told him about the baby. The table went silent. Lorelei froze, her hand halfway to her water glass. Baby? My mother gasped, looking from Carter to Lorelei. Lorelei, are you? We are trying, Carter interjected quickly, placing a hand over Lorelei's. He squeezed it hard. I saw her knuckles turn white. We plan to start a family this year, and I want my children, your grandchildren, to go to Ivy League schools. I want them to have trust funds. I don't want them to struggle like we did. Richard, don't you want to be the grandfather who secured their future? Don't you want your legacy to be more than just an old house in a dying steel town? It was a low blow. It was a precision strike at my father's deepest insecurity. The fear that his life of hard labor had amounted to nothing. I saw my father's resistance crumble. He looked down at his calloused hands. I do, Richard whispered. Of course I do. Then sign, Carter said, sliding the document and a gold pen across the table. The bank has already approved the bridge loan based on the property value. All I need is the authorization to transfer the funds to the Omnicorp holding account. Let me see that, I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the emotional fog Carter had spun. I reached out a hand. Carter's smile tightened. Isadora, this is complicated financial structure. It might be a bit over your head. I can read, I said flatly. If my parents are about to sign away their home, I want to read the fine print. Let her see it, Carter, my mother said, though her tone was impatient. She is just being cautious. Reluctantly, Carter slid the document toward me. Make it quick. We are on a deadline. I opened the folder. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It smelled of fresh toner from a hotel business center printer. Not the high-grade, chemically neutral paper Omnicorp used for official board documents. I scanned the first page. Confidentiality agreement and limited liability partnership. My eyes narrowed. The font was Times New Roman. Omnicorp had a strict brand compliance policy that required all external documents to be set in Omni Sans, a proprietary typeface commissioned for $3 million 5 years ago. No executive document had used Times New Roman since 2018. I flipped to the signature page. There it was. Julian A. Thorne, CEO. The signature was a disaster. It was shaky. The loops too wide. I had seen Julian sign his name 1,000 times. He signed with a sharp, aggressive slant to the right. This signature was upright and hesitant. It was a trace job, a bad one. Then I looked at the legal jargon. It was a word salad of investment terms pasted together from the internet. Clause 14, I said, not looking up. It mentions a Regulation D exemption for non-accredited investors, but this is structured as a Tier 1 private equity buy-in. Those are mutually exclusive under SEC rulings. You cannot have a Tier 1 offering for non-accredited investors without a prospectus filed with the Attorney General. Where is the filing number? Carter blinked. It is a private placement, Isadora. The rules are different. No, they are not, I said, flipping the page. And here, Clause 22, indemnification against market volatility up to 50%. Omnicorp never indemnifies principal investment. It is against the corporate charter. Who wrote this? Carter? Because it was not the legal department. It is a draft, Carter snapped, his face flushing a mottled red. Standard boilerplate? Jesus, Isadora, do you have to pick apart everything? This is a favor Julian is doing for me. A favor? I looked up, locking eyes with him. This document lists the receiving bank account as Omni Green Holdings LLC in the Cayman Islands. Omnicorp uses J.P. Morgan Chase for all domestic equity projects. Why is the money going to an offshore shell company? Because it is tax efficient. Carter slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. My God, you are unbearable. You sit there with your cheap clothes and your zero ambition, trying to sabotage the one big break this family has ever gotten. I am asking about liquidity, I pressed, my voice remaining ice cold against his heat. If Dad needs the money back for a medical emergency, what is the lockup period? This document says indefinite hold pending project maturity. That means you can keep their money forever. Carter, you can take the house, sell it, and they never see a dime until you decide the project is mature, which could be never. That is a lie, Carter roared. He stood up, towering over the table. I would never do that to them. I am family. He turned to my parents, his chest heaving. You see what she is doing? She is jealous. She cannot stand that I am successful. She cannot stand that Lorelei is happy and rich while she is nothing. She wants to drag you down to her level. She wants you to be poor forever so she does not feel so pathetic about herself. Isadora! My father slammed his own hand down, his face twisted in anger. But he was not looking at Carter. He was looking at me. That is enough. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, distinct and physical. Dad, look at the papers. The font is wrong. The signature. I do not care about the font, Richard shouted. I care about this family. Carter has done everything for us. He paid for this trip. He treats your sister like a queen. And all you do is sit there and pick holes. You are so negative. Isadora, you have always been so negative. Mom, I turned to her, pleading with the last shred of hope. Please, just wait until Monday. Let me call. Stop it, my mother said, her voice trembling. Tears streamed down her face. Why can you not just be happy for us? Why do you have to ruin everything? Carter offers us a future, a chance to help your grandchildren, and you treat him like a criminal. I am ashamed of you, Isadora. The words hung in the salty air like a verdict. Ashamed of you. I looked at Lorelei. She was staring at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. She knew, somewhere deep down, she knew this was wrong, but she was too terrified of the truth to speak. She chose the illusion. I looked at Carter. He was smirking, a small, victorious curl of the lip that only I could see. He had won. He had weaponized their love and their fear against my logic. If I pushed harder now, they would cut me off completely. And if they cut me off, I could not save them. I had to lose the battle to win the war. I slowly closed the folder. I took a deep breath, swallowing the bitterness that threatened to choke me. I lowered my head. I am sorry. Carter puffed out his chest. What was that? I am sorry, I repeated, forcing the words out. I guess I am just protective. I did not mean to imply I just do not want Mom and Dad to get hurt. But if you say Julian Thorne approved this, then I guess I am wrong. You are damn right you are wrong, Carter sneered. He sat back down, smoothing his shirt. But I am a forgiving man. For Lorelei's sake, just keep your mouth shut and let the adults handle business. Yes, I whispered. I will. Go ahead, Dad, Carter said, sliding the pen back to my father. Sign it. Let's secure that future. My father picked up the pen. His hand shook, but he signed, Richard Blackwell. Then my mother signed, Mary Blackwell. Carter snatched the papers away the moment the ink touched the page. He looked at them with a hunger that was almost obscene. Perfect, he said, sliding the documents into his leather portfolio. I will go upload these to the secure server right now. Congratulations, Mom, Dad, you are officially investors. I need to go to the restroom, I said, standing up abruptly. My chair scraped loudly against the stone floor. Go, Carter dismissed me with a wave of his hand. Maybe splash some cold water on your face. You look terrible. I walked away from the table. I did not go to the restroom. I walked around the corner of the terrace, out of their line of sight, and slipped into the shadow of a large decorative palm. I waited. 30 seconds later, Carter emerged. He was not walking toward the business center. He was heading for the valet stand. His phone pressed to his ear. He was moving fast. The predator escaping with the kill. He stopped by a stone pillar to light a cigarette, his hands shaking as he pulled the documents out of the portfolio to gloat over them one more time. He held them up to the light, checking the signatures, from the shadows. I raised my phone. It was not a standard consumer model. It was a secure-grade device with a high-fidelity telescopic lens. Click, I captured the cover page. Click, I captured the page with the false Cayman Islands account number. Click, I captured the page with the forged signature of Julian Thorne. Click, I captured the final page with my parents' signatures. The evidence of the crime, the proof of the fraud. Carter laughed into his phone. Yeah, I got it. The old man signed. 400 grand. I will wire it to the bookie by tonight. Tell Rocco to back off. I have the money. He shoved the papers back into his bag and strode toward his car. I lowered the phone. My hands were steady now. The hurt from my parents' words was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was buried under the cold, hard weight of duty. He had the papers, but I had the digital negatives, and unlike his forgery, my evidence would hold up in court. I turned and walked back toward the lobby. It was time to leave the Hamptons. I had a meeting to prepare for, and a funeral to arrange, not for my family, but for Carter Vance's entire existence. I checked out of the Azure Coast Resort at 11:30 in the morning. I told my mother that a pharmaceutical client in Tokyo was threatening to jump off a ledge, metaphorically speaking, and required my immediate strategic intervention. It was the kind of vague, high-stakes excuse that my family accepted because it fit their narrative of my life. Frantic, service-oriented, and ultimately beholden to the whims of others. My mother sighed and told me I worked too hard for too little money. Carter did not even look up from his phone, likely already mentally spending the $400,000 he had just conned out of my father. I drove my 10-year-old Toyota back to Manhattan in silence. I did not listen to music. I did not listen to podcasts. I spent the 2-hour drive organizing my mind, categorizing my rage into actionable folders. By the time I crossed the Triborough Bridge, the skyline of New York City rising like a circuit board of glass and steel, I was no longer Isadora the daughter. I was Isadora the auditor. My apartment is in Tribeca, in a building that looks like a converted warehouse but functions like a fortress. There is no doorman to gossip with. Entry requires a key card and a retinal scan. The interior is sparse. I own very little furniture because I do not live here to relax. I live here to work. The living room is dominated not by a television, but by a custom-built server rack and a workstation with 3 curved monitors. This is my cockpit. I tossed my bag on the gray sofa and sat down at the desk. I placed the secure phone on a magnetic charging pad and initiated the data bridge. The monitors hummed to life. System. Initiate board-level access. Authorization code. Sierra Tango 19. The screen flashed red, then settled into a soothing, deep blue. The OmniCorp board portal. This was not the public employee login. This was the God view. From here, I could see everything from the real-time pressure levels in our pipelines in Alaska to the keystrokes of a junior analyst in London. First, I needed to dismantle the myth of Carter Vance. I typed his name into the Human Resources database. Vance, Carter. The profile loaded instantly. His photo, taken 5 years ago, showed a younger, less bloated version of the man I had just eaten breakfast with. I skipped the biographical fluff and went straight to the employment status. Title: Senior Manager. Regional Accounts, Payable, Northeast Division. Reporting to Sarah Jenkins, Regional Director. I let out a short, cold laugh. He was not the regional CFO. He was not even a director. He was a glorified accountant, 3 rungs down the ladder from the people who actually sat in meetings with Julian Thorne. He was middle management filler. I scrolled down to the Performance Review tab. Q1 Review. Employee struggles with compliance protocols. Frequent calculation errors. Q2 Review. Attitude issues reported by staff. Missed deadlines. Current status. Active. Probationary period. Performance Improvement Plan, PIP, initiated October 15th. The Performance Improvement Plan. In corporate speak, that is the kiss of death. It means, we are building a paper trail to fire you legally in 90 days. Carter was not Julian's right-hand man. He was a dead man walking. He had 30 days left of employment. Max. That explained the desperation. That explained the sudden need for a large injection of cash. He was trying to buy his way out of a hole, or perhaps secure a golden parachute before he was kicked out the door. I opened a new window and pulled up the image I had captured of the Omni Green contract. I isolated the signature block, the shaky, upright scrawl of Julian A. Thorne, on the adjacent monitor. I pulled up the digitized master file of Julian's actual signature from the board's legal repository. I ran a vector comparison analysis. The software did not need long. Red boxes appeared all over Carter's document. Match, probability, 0.0%. Anomaly detected. Pressure variance consistent with tracing. Stroke order inconsistent with biometric profile. It was a clumsy forgery. He had likely projected Julian's signature onto a screen and traced it onto the paper. It was amateur hour. But then, frauds do not have to be geniuses. They just have to find victims who want to believe the lie. My parents wanted to believe. Now for the money, this was the part that would hurt. I queried the corporate registry for OmniGreen Holdings, LLC. The internal OmniCorp database returned 0 results. The project did not exist within the company. I widened the search to the Delaware Division of Corporations. Nothing. I tried Nevada. Nothing. I tried the Cayman Islands Corporate Registry. Using a backdoor access key I had acquired during a hostile merger 3 years ago. There it was. Entity name, OmniGreen Holdings. Limited. Registration date, 6 months ago. Registered agent. The Vance Family Trust. Beneficial owner. I stopped. The name on the screen blinked at me, mocking my hesitation. Beneficial owner. Lorelei Vance. He had put it in her name. I sat back in my chair, the ergonomic mesh digging into my spine. He was smart enough to keep his own name off the primary fraud vehicle. If this blew up, and it was going to blow up, Lorelei would be the one facing the SEC. Lorelei would be the one extradited. He had set up his own wife, my sister, as the fall guy for a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme. I leaned forward again, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. I needed to see the flow. If Omni Green was a shell, where was the money going? I accessed the banking metadata linked to the Cayman entity. It was a simple pass-through account. Money came in from investors. I saw names I recognized, friends of the family, old college buddies of Carter, a cousin in Ohio, and within 24 hours, it was wired out. I followed the outgoing wires. $30,000 to DraftKings Incorporated, $50,000 to Caesars Palace Credit Line, $12,000 to Mercedes-Benz Financial Services, $8,000 to Rolex Boutique Fifth Avenue. There was no renewable energy project. There were no wind turbines. There was only Carter's gambling addiction and his need to look rich. He was churning investors, using money from new victims to pay the returns to the old ones, while skimming the cream off the top to fund his bets and his suits. It was a classic Ponzi structure, fragile and collapsing. My parents' $400,000 was not going to an investment. It was going to pay off a bookie named Rocco, so Carter would not get his legs broken. I felt a vibration in my chest, a low hum of pure aggression. This was no longer a family dispute. This was federal wire fraud. This was money laundering, and he had dragged my parents and my sister into the blast radius. I picked up my phone and dialed a number that was not saved in my contacts because it did not need to be. It was a number I had dialed only 3 times in 5 years. It rang once. Blackwell, a voice answered. It was deep, smooth, and utterly devoid of warmth. Marcus Vane, OmniCorp's general counsel, the man we called the Wolf, because he cleaned up the messes the board left behind. He did not ask how I was. He did not say hello. Marcus, I said, my voice matching his tone. I am looking at a document for a Project Omni Green. Tier 1 private equity offering, Cayman domicile. There was a silence on the line. I could hear the faint scratching of a fountain pen on paper. Isadora, Marcus said slowly, we do not have a Project Omni Green, and we certainly do not do private equity rounds in the Caymans. Why are you asking? I have a rogue actor, I said. Mid-level finance, Carter Vance. He is soliciting capital from civilians using forged CEO signatures and unauthorized use of the corporate logo. Vance, Marcus repeated. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Ah, yes, the PIP case in the Northeast. We were going to terminate him next Friday for incompetence. Are you telling me I need to accelerate the timeline? Do not terminate him, I commanded. Not yet. He has collected approximately $3 million in unauthorized funds. If you fire him now, he disappears, and the liability falls on Omnicorp for failure to supervise. The press will eat us alive. Omnicorp manager runs Ponzi scheme from office. Stock drops 5 points minimum. Agreed, Marcus said. What is the play? He is coming to the gala next Saturday, I said. He thinks he is going to introduce his investors, my parents, to Julian. He wants validation. He is bringing victims to the gala? Marcus actually chuckled. It was a dry, terrifying sound. That is bold, or stupid. Both, I said. I want him to feel safe until he steps into the room. Marcus, I want a full forensic audit of his work email and hard drive. I want the chat logs. I want the printer history. Compile a dossier. I will present it to Julian. I will put the forensic team on it within the hour, Marcus said. Do you want the FBI involved? Not yet, I said, looking at the screen where Lorelei's name sat next to the offshore account. I need 24 hours to sanitize the beneficiary list. My sister is listed as the owner. She is unaware. I need to prove she is a victim, not a co-conspirator, before the feds see the paperwork. That is a gray area. Isadora, Marcus warned. I live in the gray area, Marcus. That is why you pay me. Fair enough, Marcus said. You have your 24 hours. But Isadora, if this splashes back on Julian, it will not, I cut him off. By the time I am done, Julian will look like a hero who purged the corruption from his own ranks. The stock will go up. Good hunting, Marcus said, and the line went dead. I set the phone down. I looked at the map of the data flow one last time. The $400,000 from my parents had not hit the account yet. It was Saturday. The banks were closed. The wire my father signed would be processed Monday morning at 9 o'clock. I had 36 hours. I could not stop the wire legally without exposing the investigation to Carter, which would cause him to run. I had to let the money move. I had to let the theft happen so that the crime was complete. Attempted fraud gets you a slap on the wrist. Completed wire fraud gets you 20 years in federal prison. I was going to let my parents lose everything for exactly 5 days. It was the only way to ensure Carter went away forever. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the city. The sun was setting, casting long, blood-red shadows across the Hudson River. Enjoy the money, Carter, I whispered to the glass. Buy your freedom while you can. Because Monday morning, I am closing the gate. I turned back to the computer. I had work to do. I had to build a trap that was inescapable, and I had to do it using the very tools Carter thought made him powerful. Paperwork, protocol, and the blind arrogance of a man who thinks he is the smartest person in the room. He had no idea that the room was already locked, and I was the one holding the key. Sunday morning in Manhattan was gray and weeping, a relentless drizzle that slicked the streets and matched the churning in my stomach. I sat in a booth at the back of a small, nondescript coffee shop on 3rd Avenue, far away from the places where the social climbers of Carter's circle liked to be seen. I had chosen this place for its anonymity. The coffee was bitter, served in thick ceramic mugs that held the heat too long, but I was not there for the caffeine. I was there for the intervention. On the scratched wooden table sat a plain manila folder. It did not contain the classified board documents or the forensic cyber audit I had run the night before. Those were too dangerous to share. Instead, I had sanitized the evidence. I had printed out public court records of gambling debts, the redacted HR file showing Carter's probationary status, and the registration documents for the shell company in the Cayman Islands. I checked my watch. It was 10 o'clock. Lorelei was late. When the bell above the door finally chimed at 10:15, she walked in. She looked wrecked. Her eyes were puffy, hidden behind large sunglasses that she did not remove even as she sat down across from me. She wore a trench coat belted tightly at the waist, as if she were holding herself together by sheer mechanical force. "You have 5 minutes, Isadora," she said, her voice brittle. "Carter thinks I'm at yoga. If he knew I was here meeting you, he would be furious. He would be furious because he knows I know," I said softly, pushing the coffee I had ordered for her across the table. "Drink. You look like you have not slept." "I have not," she snapped, ignoring the cup. "How could I? After the scene you caused yesterday. Mom cried all night. Dad is pacing the floor, wondering why his own daughter hates him. You broke their hearts. Isadora." "I am trying to save their lives," I said, placing my hand on the folder. "And yours, Lorelei. Please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. Look at what is in this folder. If after you look, you still want to walk away. I will never say another word about Carter again." She hesitated, her gaze flickering between my face and the folder. Curiosity is a powerful instinct, even when suppressed by fear. She reached out with a trembling hand and flipped the cover open. The first page was the employment verification. "Read the title," I instructed gently. "Senior manager, not director, not VP. And look at the status code. PIP. That stands for Performance Improvement Plan. It means he is failing. Lorelei, he is 1 step away from being fired. He does not have a corner office. He has a cubicle." "Paperwork errors," she muttered, though her voice wavered. "He told me about this. He said HR has a vendetta against him because he is too ambitious. Julian is fixing it." "Julian does not fix HR files for mid-level managers," I said. "Turn the page." She turned it. It was a credit report summary from a secondary agency, one that tracked casino markers. "Caesar's Palace, MGM Grand, the Borgata, total outstanding markers, $250,000. I read the numbers aloud. "Lorelei, he is not investing the money. He is gambling it. The reason he needs Mom and Dad's $400,000 tomorrow is not for a green energy project. It is because if he does not pay the Borgata by Tuesday, they will file a lien against your house in Greenwich." "No," she shook her head, tears slipping out from under the sunglasses. "No, he wins. He always tells me when he wins. He bought me the diamond earrings with winnings." "He bought you earrings with money he borrowed," I corrected. "But this is the most important part. Please, look at the last document." She flipped to the final page, the corporate registration for Omni Green Holdings Limited. "Look at the owner," I pointed. She squinted. "Beneficial owner, Lorelei Vance." She looked up at me, confused. "Why is my name there?" "Because when this collapses," I said, leaning in, my voice urgent and low, "he wants the FBI to come for you, not him. He set up a shell company in your name. When the investors realize the money is gone, you are the one listed on the paperwork. You are the one who will be charged with wire fraud. He is using you as a human shield." Lorelei stared at the paper. Her hands started to shake violently. For a moment, I thought I had broken through. I saw the horror dawn on her face, the realization that the man she loved had sold her out. "He put it in my name?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "Because he is a coward. We can fix this. Lorelei, we go to the police today. We show them he forged your consent. We stop the wire transfer from Mom and Dad. We can save the house." She closed her eyes, rocking back and forth slightly. "He loves me. He loves me. He loves himself," I said. Then, the moment shattered. Lorelei opened her eyes, and the horror was gone, replaced by a cold, hard wall of denial. She grabbed her phone. "I am calling him," she said. "Lorelei, do not—" I reached for her hand, but she snatched it away. "I am calling him," she shrieked, drawing stares from the other patrons. "He can explain this. He has an explanation for everything. You are just twisting things." She hit speed dial and put it on speaker. It rang twice. "Hey, baby." Carter's voice filled the small booth. It was smooth, confident, sickeningly affectionate. "Done with yoga already? I was just making mimosas for your dad." "Carter," Lorelei sobbed. "I am with Isadora." There was a pause. A silence so heavy it felt like the air pressure dropped. "I thought I told you not to speak to her," Carter said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all warmth. "She has papers." "Carter," Lorelei cried, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "She has papers that say you are being fired. She says you owe money to casinos. She says you put the company in my name to frame me. Tell me it is not true. Please." "Oh, Lorelei," Carter sighed, the sound of a disappointed parent. "I warned you about this. I told you she would get desperate. Honey, look at the papers. Do they look official? Or do they look like something she typed up on her laptop?" "They look like copies," Lorelei stammered. "Exactly," Carter said soothingly. "Isadora is a smart woman, but she is mentally unstable. We have talked about this. She is jealous of us. She forged those documents. It is easy to do with Photoshop. She wants to break us up because she is miserable and alone. Do you really believe your own husband would frame you? After everything I have done for you?" "No," Lorelei whispered, her eyes locking onto mine with sudden hatred. "No, I do not believe it." "She is manipulating you," Carter continued, his voice hardening. "Now listen to me. You get up, you walk away, and you come home and tell Isadora this. If she ever tries to slander me to my investors again, I will sue her for defamation. I will take every penny she has. And Lorelei, if we have children, she will never see them. She is not allowed near our family. She is poison." "I understand," Lorelei said, wiping her face. "I am coming home." She hung up. She stood up, gathering her coat. She did not look at the folder. She looked at me as if I were a stranger. "You forged them," she said. It was not a question. It was a statement of faith. "Lorelei, I can take you to the courthouse," I pleaded, standing up. "I can prove it. Stay away from us," she hissed. "Carter is right. You are poison. Do not contact me. Do not contact Mom and Dad. You are dead to us." She turned and ran out of the shop, into the rain. I stood there, one hand reaching out to empty air, while the other patrons looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and pity. I slowly sat back down. I drank the cold coffee. It tasted like ash. I waited for the second blow. I knew it was coming. It arrived at 8 o'clock that evening. I was back in my apartment, staring at the wall of monitors, watching the stock ticker for Omnicorp scroll by. The phone rang. It was my father. I picked it up. "Dad?" "Do not call me that." His voice was unrecognizable. It was not the voice of the man who taught me to ride a bike. It was the voice of a man defending his survival. "We just spoke to Carter. He told us what you did today. Harassing your sister? Forging documents?" "Dad, I did not forge anything. Carter is stealing from you. Please, do not send the money tomorrow." "The money is already scheduled," he shouted. "We signed the authorization. It goes out at 9 in the morning. And you know why? Because we believe in him. We do not believe in a daughter who tries to destroy her sister's marriage out of spite." "Spite?" I felt a crack in my composure. "I am trying to save your house. He is going to lose it. The only thing lost here is you." My mother's voice came on the line, shrill and hysterical. "You are banned. Isadora, do not come to Christmas. Do not come to Thanksgiving until you apologize to Carter and admit you lied. You are not welcome in this family. We have one daughter now, and her name is Lorelei." The line went dead. I held the phone to my ear for a long time, listening to the silence. I had done everything a sister and a daughter was supposed to do. I had warned them. I had begged. I had shown proof. And they had chosen the beautiful lie over the ugly truth. They had chosen the predator because he made them feel special, while I only made them feel foolish. I lowered the phone and placed it gently on the desk. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not pain. The pain had peaked and then vanished, leaving behind a cold, vast emptiness. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being cut loose. I was no longer their daughter. I was no longer Lorelei's sister. I was released from the obligation of emotion. If I could not save them as a family member, I would save them as an executioner. I would not stop the wire transfer. I would let the money go. I would let them lose it all, because that was the price of their blindness. And then, I would hunt Carter down not to get their money back, but to put him in a cage where he could never hurt anyone else again. My secure phone buzzed on the desk. A single text message notification. I picked it up. Sender. J. Thorne message. Rumors are circulating about a rogue agent in the Northeast pitching a fake green fund. I have investors asking questions. Isadora, handle this. I want it clean, and I want it done before the board meeting. Do not disappoint me. I looked at the message. Julian knew. The whispers were starting to reach the top. If I didn't act, the corruption would stain the board, and my own position would be compromised. I typed a reply. Response: the target is identified. The trap is set. By Tuesday, the problem will be eliminated. I hit send. I turned back to my screens. I opened the file labeled Gala Seating Chart. I found the table assigned to Carter Vance and guests. I moved my cursor and highlighted the table. Then, I opened a new command window. Command: Authorize Security Clearance Override. Target: Isadora Blackwell. Status: Board Director. I was done being the sister. It was time to be the boss. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House. Hilton in Chicago does not smell like a hotel on the night of the Omnicorp annual charity gala. It smells of old money, aggressive perfume, and the kind of desperation that only exists when 500 people are competing for the attention of one man. The ceiling is a masterpiece of frescoed mythology, 20 feet high, where painted gods look down upon the mortals below. Tonight, the mortals were the captains of industry, the politicians, and the socialites who had paid $10,000 a plate to breathe the same air as Julian Thorne. And then, there was my family. I was not on the floor with them. I was 20 feet above, standing behind the tinted, bulletproof glass of the main security control room. Known in the trade as the Perch, the room was dark, lit only by the cool blue glow of 50 high-definition monitors. The air conditioning hummed with a low, expensive efficiency. To my left stood Marcus Vane, Omnicorp's general counsel. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my father's car, and he was peeling a mandarin orange with a small, terrifyingly sharp pocket knife. To my right stood Special Agent Miller from the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division. She was not wearing a tuxedo. She wore a navy pantsuit and an expression of profound boredom that terrified me more than Marcus's knife. Target has entered the perimeter, the head of security murmured into his headset. I looked at the center monitor. Camera 4 zoomed in on the main entrance. Carter Vance walked in first. He was wearing a tuxedo with tails, a fashion choice that was 20 years out of date and screamed rental. The fit was poor. The jacket strained across his shoulders, and the pants bunched at the ankles. But he walked with the strut of a rooster in a henhouse, his chest puffed out, a wide, plastic smile plastered across his face. Behind him came my parents. My father, Richard, looked as if he were being marched to a firing squad. He tugged uncomfortably at his collar, his eyes darting around the cavernous room with a mix of awe and terror. My mother, Mary, was dressed in a sequined gown that was too flashy for a black tie event, the kind of dress sold to people who think glitter equals class. She was clutching her purse with both hands, looking at the chandeliers as if she expected them to fall. And Lorelei, My sister looked beautiful, but it was a brittle, fragile beauty. She was pale, her makeup applied a little too heavily to cover the lack of sleep. She held Carter's arm not with affection, but for balance. "Ticket verification?" I asked, my voice calm. Marcus Vane checked his tablet. He bought them on the secondary market, scalped from a vendor who canceled last minute, paid 3 times the face value, using, I assume, your father's retirement money. "The wire transfer cleared this morning," Agent Miller confirmed. Her eyes locked on the screen. $400,000 moved from the Blackwell joint account to the Cayman Shell entity at 9:03 this morning. The crime is complete. We have him on wire fraud, money laundering, and securities fraud. I can arrest him right now in the lobby. "No," I said. "Not in the lobby." "Isadora," Agent Miller warned, "this is an active investigation. We do not do theatrics." "I do," I said, not taking my eyes off Carter. "He brought them here to humiliate me. He brought them here to cement his lie. If you arrest him in the lobby, he spins it. He tells them it is a misunderstanding. He tells them I set him up. He becomes a martyr. I need him to be exposed in front of the God he prays to. I need Julian to do it," Marcus chuckled, popping a slice of orange into his mouth. "Let her play. Agent Miller, the board authorized a public cleansing. We need the stock market to see that we police our own. A lobby arrest is a news footnote. A ballroom arrest is a statement." Agent Miller sighed, checking her watch. "You have 1 hour. Once the speeches start, my team moves in." "1 hour is all I need," I said, on the screen. Carter was leading my family through the crowd. He was acting the part of the gracious host. But I knew the geography of this room. The tables near the stage were for the board and the C-suite. The tables in the middle were for the senior VPs and major partners. Carter was leading them to table 89, which was located in the back corner. Next to the swinging doors of the catering kitchen, he stopped them in the middle of the room, forcing a waiter to swerve around them. I saw him point a finger toward a group of men standing near the ice sculpture. I tapped a button on the console. "Audio?" The security technician isolated the directional microphone in the ballroom chandelier nearest to them. Carter's voice, tinny but clear, filled the control room. "You see that man?" Carter was saying, pointing at a tall, gray-haired gentleman. "That is Senator Higgins. We played poker last month. He owes me $500. I would go say hi, but I do not want to embarrass him in front of his wife. Senator Higgins is in D.C., voting on a budget bill," Marcus noted dryly. "That is the catering manager for the hotel." "Wow," my father's voice came through, filled with naive wonder. "You really know everyone, Carter?" "It is a small world at the top, Dad," Carter said, adjusting his bow tie. "Oh, and look over there. See that woman in the red dress? That is the Vice President of Operations. She and I are working closely on the Omni Green rollout. She practically begged me to lead the project. The woman in the red dress was the wife of a shareholder from Texas. She had never worked a day in her life." "He is pathological," Agent Miller muttered. "He does not just lie about the crime. He lies about the air he breathes." "He has to," I said. "If he stops lying for 1 second, the reality of who he is will crush him. He is a small man trying to cast a giant shadow." Carter finally steered them to their table. He seemed annoyed by the location, gesturing angrily at a waiter as if it were a mistake. But he quickly recovered, leaning in to whisper something to my mother that made her pat his hand reassuringly. Then, he made his move. "He is going for the inner circle," the security chief announced. I watched as Carter stood up, buttoned his jacket, and motioned for my family to follow him. He was leading them away from the kitchen, through the sea of tables, toward the velvet rope that cordoned off the VIP section near the stage. That was where Julian Thorne sat. That was where the board sat. That was where I would be sitting in 20 minutes. Carter walked with purpose, but I could see the tension in his neck. He needed a photo. He needed one picture of him shaking Julian's hand to send to the other investors he was scamming, to prove he was legit. He was risking everything on a handshake. They reached the checkpoint. Two security guards, built like linebackers and wearing earpieces, stood with their hands clasped in front of them. Carter approached the lead guard with a wide, winning smile. He clapped the man on the shoulder. A mistake. The guard did not move. Carter's hand slid off awkwardly. "Evening, gentlemen," Carter's voice came through the audio feed. "Carter Vance, Northeast Finance. I have my family here. We are just going to pop in and say a quick hello to Julian. He is expecting us." The guard did not smile. He did not look at the family. He looked at the tablet in his hand. "Name?" the guard asked. "Vance," Carter said, his smile faltering slightly. "Carter Vance. Like I said, Julian knows I'm coming. We are close." The guard scrolled. He scrolled for a long time. The silence stretched out, painful and sharp. My father shifted his weight, looking around nervously to see if anyone was watching. Lorelei bit her lip. "I do not have a Vance on the access list for the inner circle," the guard said, his voice flat. "This area is restricted to board members and C-level executives only." "Check again," Carter snapped, his tone shifting from charm to aggression. "There must be a mistake. Look, I am a personal friend of the CEO. If you do not let me in, I will have to call him, and he will not be happy that his security is harassing his guests." "Sir," the guard stepped forward, blocking the path physically. "Mr. Thorne is currently in a pre-event briefing. No unauthorized personnel. Please return to your table." "But," Carter started, "please return to your table, or you will be escorted out," the guard said. He did not shout. He did not have to. The threat was absolute. Carter froze. He looked at the guard. Then he looked past him at the VIP tables where the elites were laughing and drinking, completely unaware of his existence. For a second, I saw the panic in his eyes. He was close enough to touch the world he wanted, but the glass wall was unbreakable. He turned back to my parents. The mask slammed back into place instantly. "Julian is in a briefing," Carter lied smoothly, loud enough for the people at the nearby tables to hear. "Security is tight because of the senator. Julian texted me earlier, said he got held up." He said, "Carter, sorry, catch you after the speeches. Classic Julian, always working." "Oh, that is a shame," my mother said, looking relieved that the confrontation was over. "Well, maybe later." "Definitely later," Carter said, ushering them away. "He wants to meet you. He insists on it. Come on, let's get some drinks. The champagne here is vintage." I watched them retreat to the shadows of the back tables. "He is good," Marcus admitted. "I will give him that. He dances on the edge of the volcano without looking down." "He is not dancing," I said, standing up and smoothing the skirt of my black velvet gown. "He is falling. He just has not hit the bottom yet." I turned to Agent Miller. "Is the team ready?" "We are positioned at all exits," she said. "We have plainclothes agents at the bar and the kitchen. He is not leaving this building without bracelets." "Good," I said. "Marcus, are the slides loaded into the presentation deck?" "They are," Marcus said, closing his knife. "Right after the Q3 revenue projections and before the charity pledge drive, it will be the most memorable PowerPoint presentation in corporate history." "Then it is time," I said. I walked to the door of the control room. I caught my reflection in the dark glass. I did not look like the sister who used to braid Lorelei's hair. I did not look like the daughter who used to bake cookies with her mother. I looked like a weapon forged in the cold fires of Wall Street. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked. "To take my seat," I said. "I believe I'm expected at the head table." I left the safety of the booth and began the descent. I walked down the service corridor, my heels clicking on the concrete, echoing the countdown clock in my head. I emerged from behind the stage curtains, slipping into the VIP section from the side entrance that only the board used. The lights were dimming, the orchestra was playing a soft, anticipatory swell of strings. I moved through the darkness like a shark in deep water. I walked past the senators, past the oil tycoons, past the tech billionaires. I reached table 1, the center of the universe. Julian Thorne was already there. He stood up as I approached. Buttoning his jacket, he looked impeccable, a man carved out of granite and old money. "Isadora," he nodded, pulling out the chair to his right. "You cut it close." "Traffic," I said, sitting down. "Is the problem handled?" he asked quietly, leaning in so the billionaire to his left could not hear. "The problem is sitting at table 89, I said, picking up my napkin. "And in 10 minutes, he is going to be the main attraction." Julian smiled, a cold, thin expression that did not reach his eyes. "Excellent. I hate loose ends." I turned my chair slightly, just enough to look back across the vast, glittering ocean of the ballroom. I found them. Table 89. Carter was pouring wine, laughing, his hand resting possessively on my father's shoulder. He was king of his little hill of lies. He looked up, across 500 heads, across the candlelit darkness. Our eyes met. At first, he squinted, not recognizing me. I was just a silhouette at the head table, but then, a spotlight from the stage swept over the crowd, illuminating me for a split second. I saw his jaw drop. I saw the wineglass tilt in his hand, spilling red liquid onto the white tablecloth, a stain that looked remarkably like blood. He saw me. He saw me sitting at the right hand of God. And for the first time, Carter Vance realized that he was not the hunter. He was the prey. The moment our eyes met across the cavernous expanse of the ballroom, I saw the exact second the panic set in. Carter Vance did not see a board director when he looked at me. He saw a loose thread. He saw the unemployed, bitter sister-in-law, who had somehow slipped past the velvet ropes to ruin his carefully constructed fantasy. In his mind, my presence at the head table was not a sign of my status. It was a security breach. He likely believed I had seduced a waiter or bribed a guard to get close to Julian Thorne so I could spill his secrets. He moved with the frantic energy of a man trying to catch a falling vase. I watched from the edge of the raised VIP platform as he practically dragged my parents and Lorelei out of their seats. He was abandoning his wine, his half-eaten salad, and his dignity to intercept me before I could embarrass him. I decided to make it easy for him. I stepped down from the platform, moving into the open space between the VIP cordon and the general seating area. The lights were dim, but the spotlight that had swept over the crowd left a lingering after-image. I stood there in my black velvet gown, a column of darkness amidst the sea of sequins and tuxedos. The dress was a custom piece by a designer in Milan who only made 10 dresses a year. It was simple, severe, and cost more than Carter's car. But to Carter, I assumed it just looked like something I had pulled out of a costume box to play pretend. He reached me before I had taken 5 steps. He was breathless, his face a mask of shiny, sweaty terror that he was desperately trying to twist into authoritative anger. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, grabbing my upper arm. His grip was hard, painful. He was forgetting himself. He was forgetting that we were in public. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his eyes. I did not speak. I simply raised an eyebrow. He released me as if burned. But he did not back down. He stepped into my personal space, using his height to try and intimidate me. My parents and Lorelei stumbled up behind him, forming a ragged, terrified phalanx. "I asked you a question, Isadora," Carter whispered furiously, glancing back at the head table to make sure Julian wasn't watching. "How did you get in here? Did you sneak in through the kitchen? Did you steal a pass?" "Carter, please," my mother whimpered, clutching her purse to her chest. She looked at me with eyes full of tears and humiliation. "Isadora, why are you doing this? Why can you not just let us have this one night?" "Mom, I started to speak, but Carter cut me off, his voice rising. "She is doing it because she is sick. Mary!" Carter spat. He was no longer whispering. The adrenaline was taking over. He wanted to destroy me before I could destroy him. He wanted to paint the narrative so vividly that no one would believe a word I said. "She followed us. She is obsessed. Look at her, standing there in that dress like she belongs here. It is pathetic." He turned to me, his lip curling in a sneer that I had seen many times over the years, usually when he was criticizing my life choices over Thanksgiving dinner, but tonight, magnified by the fear of exposure, it was grotesque. "Who are you trying to fool? Isadora?" he asked loudly. Heads at the nearby tables began to turn. "Did you dress up to try and snag a husband? Is that it? You thought you would sneak into a room full of millionaires and trap some poor drunk executive?" "Carter, lower your voice," Lorelei begged, tugging at his sleeve. She looked sick. She looked around at the staring faces, her cheeks burning with shame. "People are looking." "Let them look," Carter declared, shaking her off. He spread his arms wide, performing for the audience he thought was on his side. "Let them see what I have to deal with. This is my sister-in-law. Everyone, the unemployed consultant who thinks the world owes her a living." The chatter in the immediate vicinity died out. The clinking of silverware stopped. A silence rippled outward from where we stood, drawing more and more attention. This was exactly what I wanted. Yet seeing my parents shrink under the weight of the scrutiny sent a pang of cold sorrow through me. My father was staring at his shoes, unable to look at me or Carter. He looked defeated. "You need to leave," Carter commanded, pointing a trembling finger at the exit. "Right now, before I have you thrown out. You are embarrassing Mom and Dad. You are embarrassing Lorelei. Have you no shame?" I stood perfectly still. I did not fidget. I did not look away. I kept my face completely neutral, the expression I wore during hostile takeovers and boardroom inquisitions. Silence is a mirror. The longer I stayed silent, the more Carter's reflection became distorted and ugly. "Are you deaf?" Carter stepped closer, invading my space again. "I said get out. This area is for VIPs. It is for people who actually contribute to society, not leeches like you." "Carter, stop," my father whispered hoarsely. "Let's just go back to the table. Please." "No, Richard," Carter said, his voice booming now, echoing off the high ceilings. He was manic. He thought he was winning. He thought he was the hero protecting his castle from the invader. "If we let her stay, she wins. She thinks she can just walk into my world and pretend to be one of us. I won't have it. Julian Thorne is sitting right there. If he sees her harassing me, it reflects badly on me." He looked around wildly for support. He saw a man in a tuxedo walking briskly past us, holding a clipboard. It was Henri, the director of operations for the entire hotel chain, a man who managed events for heads of state. Carter, in his arrogance, saw only a servant. "You, hey you!" Carter snapped his fingers at Henri. "Security, over here." Henri stopped. He turned slowly. He was a man of immense dignity, with silver hair and a posture that suggested he had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. He looked at Carter's snapping fingers with mild distaste. "Yes, sir?" Henri asked, his French accent clipped and polite. "This woman," Carter gestured violently at me. "She is crashing this party. She is not on the list. She is harassing me and my guests. I want her removed immediately, escorted off the premises, and check her purse. She probably stole silverware." My mother gasped. "Carter?" "I am serious. Mary," Carter said, not looking at her. His eyes were fixed on Henri. "Well, what are you waiting for? Do you know who I am? I am a personal friend of Julian Thorne. If you do not get this trash out of my sight, I will have your job by tomorrow morning." The threat hung in the air, sharp and toxic. The guests at the surrounding tables, wealthy donors, politicians, captains of industry, were watching with rapt attention. They were not looking at me with disgust. They were looking at Carter with the kind of fascination one reserves for a car crash. They saw a man in an ill-fitting suit screaming at a woman who stood with the poise of a queen. Henri looked at Carter. He looked at the sweating face, the cheap tuxedo, the manic eyes. He looked at the badge on Carter's lapel that identified him as general admission. Then, Henri turned to me. His expression softened instantly. The professional mask melted into genuine respect. He ignored Carter completely. He stepped past him, ignoring the hand Carter had raised to point at me. Henri stopped 2 feet in front of me. He placed his right hand over his heart and bowed. It was not a shallow nod. It was a deep, formal bow, the kind reserved for royalty or the people who sign the paychecks. "Good evening, Ms. Blackwell," Henri said, his voice warm and carrying clearly in the silence. "It is an honor to have you with us tonight. The kitchen has prepared the vegan option for your table as requested, and might I say, that gown is exquisite." The world stopped. I saw the color drain from Carter's face so fast it looked like a physical blow. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hand, still pointing at me, began to tremble uncontrollably. My mother stopped crying. She stared at Henri, then at me, her brain trying to compute data that made no sense. "Ms. Blackwell? The honor? The vegan option?" "I what?" Carter croaked. It was a small, broken sound. "Wait, you made a mistake. She is nobody. She is my sister-in-law." Henri straightened up and turned back to Carter. The warmth was gone. His eyes were like flint. "I do not make mistakes, sir," Henri said coldly. "And I would advise you to lower your voice. You are speaking to a member of the board of directors of Omnicorp." The words hit the group like a physical shockwave. Board of directors. My father grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. Lorelei let out a sharp gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. "Board?" Carter whispered. He looked at me. He looked at the VIP table behind me where Julian Thorne was watching. He looked back at me. The arrogance was fracturing, cracking apart to reveal the terrified small man underneath. "That is impossible. You are a consultant. You drive a Toyota." "I drive a Toyota because I like it, Carter," I said. My voice was calm, conversational, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a judge reading a sentence. "And I am a consultant. I consult for the people who own this company. I consult for the people who decide whether you have a job tomorrow." Henri stepped closer to me, protective and deferential. "Ms. Blackwell, is this individual bothering you? Shall I have security remove him? We have agents on standby." I looked at Carter. I saw the realization crashing down on him. He realized why I had questioned the font on the contract. He realized why I knew the audit protocols. He realized that for the last 48 hours, he had been trying to con a woman who could buy and sell his entire existence before breakfast. He looked at my parents. They were looking at me with a mixture of fear and awe. As if I had suddenly grown wings and breathed fire, they realized that the daughter they had pitied, the daughter they had scolded for being negative, held the keys to the kingdom they were so desperate to enter. "No, Henri," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Carter's. "Do not remove him yet. He has a front row seat for the presentation. And I think he needs to see it." "Very good, ma'am," Henri murmured. "Isadora," Carter stammered. He took a step back, his hands coming up in a defensive posture. "Isadora, wait, I didn't know. It was a joke. I was just joking. You know that, right? Just a family joke." "A joke," I repeated flatly. "Yes, we were just having fun." He turned to my father, desperate for an ally. "Richard, tell her. We were just teasing. Tell her we are family." My father did not speak. He stared at me, seeing me for the first time in his life. He saw the way the hotel manager bowed. He saw the way the crowd watched me with respect. And he saw the way Carter was sweating. The illusion of the successful son-in-law was dissolving right before his eyes, replaced by the reality of a sweating, panic-stricken fraud. "Go back to your table. Carter," I said. "Take my parents and my sister. Sit down, and do not move. But sit down." The command was absolute. It was not a sister speaking. It was authority. Carter swallowed hard. He looked like he wanted to run, but he knew there was nowhere to go. The exits were watched. The crowd was watching. He was trapped in the spotlight he had craved so desperately. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, we are going." He grabbed Lorelei's arm. But this time, there was no swagger. He looked like a prisoner being led back to his cell. He shuffled away, head down, dragging my bewildered family back into the shadows of the general seating area. I watched them go. I saw my mother look back at me one last time. Her expression was unreadable. Shock, confusion, and perhaps the first dawning of terror. "Shall I escort you to your seat, Ms. Blackwell?" Henri asked. "Thank you, Henri," I said. I walked back up the steps to the VIP platform. The transition was complete. I had stepped out of the role of the victim and into the role of the judge. The gavel was about to fall, and Carter Vance had just voluntarily placed his head on the block. I sat down next to Julian Thorne. "Showtime?" Julian asked, taking a sip of his whiskey. "Showtime," I replied. I looked at the giant screen above the stage. It was currently displaying the Omnicorp logo. In 5 minutes, it would display something very different. I picked up my glass of water. My hand was perfectly steady. The party was finally getting interesting. The air at table 89 was so thick with denial it was almost unbreathable. Carter Vance sat huddled over his wine glass, his face a glistening mask of sweat and panic, frantically trying to rewrite the history of the last 5 minutes. He had dragged my parents and sister back to this exile in the shadows, and now he was working desperately to patch the cracks in his reality. "It was a mix-up," Carter stammered, his voice low and vibrating with a manic intensity. He poured himself another glass of wine, his hand shaking so badly the bottle clinked rhythmically against the crystal. "That manager, Henri? He is known for being confused, senile, almost. He probably mistook Isadora for someone else. Maybe a donor's wife, or maybe she bribed him. Yes, that is it. She slipped him $50 to make a scene." My father, Richard, looked at Carter. For the first time in 10 years, there was no adoration in his eyes, only a deep, furrowed confusion. "Carter," the man bowed. He called her a member of the board. You do not bow to someone for $50, and he knew about her vegan meal request. "It is part of her game. Richard," Carter hissed, leaning across the table, his eyes bulging. "She is sick. I told you. She probably hacked the guest list. She is unemployed. She has not had a W-2 form in 5 years. How could she be on the board of a Fortune 500 company? It is ludicrous. It is a fantasy. She is doing this to humiliate me because she knows I'm about to close the biggest deal of my life." Lorelei sat in silence, staring at her hands. She was trembling. The cognitive dissonance was tearing her apart. She wanted to believe her husband, but the image of Henri, the hotel director, treating me like royalty was burned into her retina. "Just wait," Carter said, wiping his upper lip with a napkin. "Just wait until Julian gets here. He will clear this up. He will tell you. He will laugh about it. He will say, 'Who is this crazy woman?' And we will all have a good story to tell at the country club," as if summoned by his desperation. The house lights in the grand ballroom suddenly died. The murmuring of 500 guests was instantly extinguished. The darkness was absolute for 3 heartbeats, heavy and expectant. Then, a single, brilliant beam of white light cut through the gloom, illuminating the main aisle that ran down the center of the room like a spinal cord. The orchestra swelled, a majestic, driving crescendo. At the far end of the aisle, the double doors swung open. Julian Thorne appeared. He did not walk. He glided. The CEO of Omnicorp was a man who occupied space with the gravitational pull of a collapsed star. He was tall, wearing a tuxedo that fit him with the precision of armor. His silver hair caught the spotlight, creating a halo of authority. He walked with a slow, predatory grace, acknowledging the applause with small, measured nods. He was not just a businessman. In this room, he was a deity. He began his procession toward the stage, shaking hands with a senator here, a billionaire there. He was moving closer to table 89. Carter saw him. I watched from the VIP platform near the stage, my position elevated and obscured by the darkness. observing the tragedy unfold with the detachment of a scientist watching a lab rat navigate a maze with no exit. Carter pushed his chair back. It made a harsh scraping sound on the floor. "There he is," Carter whispered, his voice cracking with relief. "That is him. Watch. I will prove it." He stood up. He adjusted his cheap bow tie. He smoothed the front of his ill-fitting rental jacket. "Carter, sit down," my mother hissed, terrified. "He is in the middle of a procession. He wants to see me. Mary," Carter said. His eyes locked on Julian like a drowning man staring at a rescue boat. "We are friends." Carter stepped out of the shadows of the back tables and lunged into the main aisle, directly into the path of the spotlight. The timing was catastrophic. Julian had just finished shaking hands with the mayor of Chicago and was turning back to the center of the aisle to continue his walk to the stage. Carter threw himself in front of Julian, blocking his path. "Julian!" Carter shouted. His voice was too loud, too high-pitched, a jagged tear in the fabric of the elegant atmosphere. Julian Thorne stopped. The entire procession stopped. The security detail, 4 men with earpieces and eyes like sharks, closed in instantly, their hands moving to their jackets. Carter did not see the security. He only saw his savior. He grabbed my father's arm and yanked him forward, forcing my reluctant, horrified father into the harsh glare of the spotlight. "Julian, it is me! Carter!" Carter beamed, a wide, frantic rictus of a smile. He extended his hand, expecting the warm embrace he had promised my parents for months. "Carter Vance, from Northeast Finance. I told you I would bring the family." The silence that fell over the room was heavier than the darkness had been. 500 of the most powerful people in America watched. Julian Thorne did not take the hand. He stood perfectly still, looking at Carter. His expression was not angry. It was not annoyed. It was the blank, uncomprehending stare one gives to a stranger who starts screaming on a subway car. It was an utter lack of recognition. "Carter?" Julian repeated the name, tasting it like spoiled milk. "I am sorry. Do I know you?" The words were soft, amplified slightly by the lapel microphone Julian wore for his speech. They echoed off the frescoed ceiling. "Do I know you?" Carter's smile froze. It began to twitch at the corners. "It is Carter," he stammered, his hand still hanging in the air, ignored and tragic. "From the golf game? Liberty National? We had dinner at Le Bernardin? You gave me the corporate card? The Omni Green Project?" Julian's eyes narrowed. The confusion vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp intellect. He looked at Carter's sweating face. He looked at my terrified father. He looked at the cheap tuxedo. "I have never played golf at Liberty National," Julian said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze oxygen. "And I certainly have never had dinner with you. Who let you in here?" But, Carter was hyperventilating now. "The card. You gave me the level 3 card. You said we were friends. You said..." Julian turned to the head of his security detail, who was standing just inches from Carter's elbow. "Why is this man blocking my path?" Julian asked, not looking at Carter anymore. He spoke about him as if he were a piece of furniture that had been placed incorrectly. "He claims to be an employee. Mr. Thorne," the guard said. "He bypassed the perimeter check." "Julian, please," Carter begged, stepping forward, trying to grab Julian's sleeve. "Do not do this. My wife is watching. My in-laws are here. Just shake my hand. Please, tell them we know each other." Julian stepped back, avoiding Carter's touch with a look of genuine revulsion. "Security," Julian said, his voice crisp and carrying to the back of the room. "I was informed earlier that a disturbed individual was harassing a member of my board of directors. Is this him?" "Yes, sir," the guard replied. "This is the individual who accosted Director Blackwell." Julian looked back at Carter. The look was withering. "You are not my friend. Young man, I do not know you, but I know that you are harassing the leadership of this company. If you do not step aside, I will have you arrested for trespassing." Carter made a sound like a wounded animal. He looked at my father. My father was staring at Julian Thorne, the man Carter claimed was his best friend, and seeing the absolute truth, the lie had not just cracked, it had disintegrated. "Move," Julian commanded. Carter stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. He nearly fell into the lap of the mayor of Chicago. He was gasping for air, his face a deep, mottled purple. Julian Thorne adjusted his cuffs. He did not look at Carter again. He stepped over the spot where Carter had stood, as if avoiding a puddle of dirty water. He continued his walk. He walked past the senators. He walked past the oil barons. He walked straight toward the VIP platform where I was sitting. The spotlight followed him, and consequently, it found me. I sat motionless, my hands folded in my lap, my expression serene. I watched Julian approach. I did not stand up. One does not stand up for a peer in a moment of crisis management. One holds the ground. Julian walked up the 3 steps to the platform. He stopped directly in front of my table. The room held its breath. Was he going to evict me too? Was Carter right? Was I the crazy stalker? Julian smiled. It was not the cold, polite smile he gave the donors. It was a genuine, warm smile of respect. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of deference that sent a shockwave through the room. "Director Blackwell," Julian said, his voice warm and amplified for all to hear. "My apologies for the delay. The European regulators were being difficult on the conference call." I nodded slowly. "Regulators usually are. Julian, I assume you held the line on the subprime leverage cap?" "Naturally," Julian chuckled. He pulled out the chair next to me, the seat of honor, and sat down. He leaned in, his body language screaming intimacy and partnership. "But we have a bigger issue. We need to discuss the merger timeline before I give the keynote. I need your vote on the acquisition strategy. The board is split, and your 2% is the deciding factor." The camera feed on the giant screens above the stage zoomed in on us. My face, calm and authoritative, was now 30 feet tall. Next to me, the legendary Julian Thorne was looking at me not as a subordinate, but as a crucial ally. I glanced at the monitor, then shifted my gaze down to the floor, searching for table 89. I found them. My parents were standing up, clutching each other. Their mouths were open. They looked from the giant screen to the real me, their brains short-circuiting. The daughter they had called a failure, the daughter they had banned from Thanksgiving, was sitting on the throne of their world, deciding the fate of a merger while their savior Carter cowered in the shadows. Lorelei was sobbing silently, her hand over her mouth, staring at me with a look of absolute devastation. She finally saw the gap between us. It was not a gap of money, it was a gap of reality. And Carter? Carter was slumped against a pillar, looking like a man who had just watched his own execution. He was staring up at the screen, at my face looming over him like a vengeful god. I turned back to Julian. I picked up my wine glass. Water, actually, but in the crystal, it looked like diamonds. "The merger can wait 5 minutes. Julian," I said, my voice low but captured perfectly by the table microphone. "There is a personnel matter we need to resolve first." "Oh?" Julian raised an eyebrow. "The harasser?" I smiled. It was a small, terrifying smile. "Yes," I said. "Julian, I think you should know the name of that employee who tried to grab you, the one you did not recognize." "He said his name was Carter something." Julian frowned. "Carter Vance?" I supplied clearly. "He is a mid-level manager in the Northeast Division, and he is the man who is currently selling a private equity project called Omni Green to retirees." Julian's face went rigid. "Omni Green? We have no such project." "I know," I said, swirling my water. "But he has collected $3 million in buy-ins. He has been telling investors, including the elderly couple standing next to him, who happen to be my parents, that you personally authorized it. He claims he plays golf with you. He claims he has your personal spending card. He claims—" I paused, letting the words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. He claims you and he are best friends. Julian turned slowly in his chair. He looked down from the high platform, scanning the darkness until his eyes locked onto Carter Vance. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "He is using my name to run a Ponzi scheme?" Julian asked, his voice quiet, deadly. "He forged your signature." "Julian," I said. "I have the documents on my secure server. He took $400,000 from Richard and Mary Blackwell this morning. He told them it was a favor from you." Julian stood up. He did not look like a CEO anymore. He looked like a king who had discovered a traitor in his court. "Marcus," Julian said, not turning his head. Marcus Vane materialized from the shadows, his notebook open. "Sir, did you hear Director Blackwell?" "I did, sir," Marcus said. "I have the FBI team on standby at the north exit." "Bring him to the stage," Julian commanded. "Sir?" Marcus hesitated. "To the holding room?" "No," Julian said. He looked at me, and we shared a moment of perfect, ruthless understanding. "Director Blackwell wants a public cleansing. We will give her one. Bring Mr. Vance to the stage. I want everyone to see what happens when you steal from my family." I looked down at Carter. He was shaking his head, backing away, but the security guards were already moving in. The trap had snapped shut. "Run, Carter," I whispered to myself, though I knew he couldn't hear me. "Run and make it fun for them." But he didn't run. He couldn't. He was paralyzed by the sheer, crushing weight of the truth. The silence that followed my revelation was not the silence of peace. It was the vacuum before an explosion. Julian Thorne sat frozen in his chair, his eyes fixed on the man cowering in the shadows of the ballroom. The name Omni Green seemed to hang in the air like a toxic vapor. Julian did not scream. He did not flip the table. He simply turned his head slightly to the left, where Marcus Vane was waiting with the stillness of a loaded weapon. "Seal the room," Julian said. His voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried the weight of absolute command. "Nobody leaves, especially not him." Marcus Vane tapped his earpiece. "Lockdown, now." The heavy double doors at the back of the grand ballroom slammed shut with a dull, resonant thud that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. The sound made half the guests jump. The festive atmosphere evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, sharp tension. The orchestra stopped playing mid-measure, the violinist lowering his bow with a confused frown. I stood up. I did not look at my parents. I did not look at Lorelei. I walked past Julian, past the stunned senator, and ascended the 3 steps to the main stage. The podium was waiting for me. It was set up for Julian's keynote speech on global energy trends. But tonight, it would serve a different purpose. I tapped the microphone. The sound thumped through the massive speakers, a heartbeat of impending doom. "Cut the music," I ordered. The room went dead silent. 500 faces turned toward me. Some were confused, some were annoyed, but all were watching. I looked up at the projection booth, a dark window high in the back wall. I raised my hand, a signal I had arranged 20 minutes ago. "Tech," I said, my voice calm and amplified to every corner of the room. "Override the main feed. Execute file case study Vance." The giant LED screen behind me, which had been displaying a looping golden animation of the Omnicorp logo, flickered once, then it turned a stark, clinical white. A complex diagram appeared. It was not a corporate growth chart. It was a forensic map of a crime. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice devoid of any theatricality. I spoke with the flat, brutal precision of an auditor reading a death sentence. "We apologize for the interruption to your dinner. However, Omnicorp prides itself on transparency, and tonight, we have discovered a cancer in our body that requires immediate surgical removal." I picked up the laser pointer from the podium. A red dot appeared on the screen, circling a photograph of a smiling Carter Vance. "This is Carter Vance," I said. "Until 5 minutes ago, he was a senior manager in our Northeast Division. He has spent the last 6 months telling his family, his friends, and many of you in this room that he is the right hand of Julian Thorne. He has claimed to be a director. He has claimed to be a visionary. I clicked the remote. The screen changed. It showed a series of bank transfers, red arrows pointing from personal accounts into a black hole labeled Omni Green Holdings Limited, Cayman Islands. The truth is somewhat less impressive, I continued. Carter Vance is not a director. He is currently on a performance improvement plan for incompetence, but his lack of skill in finance is matched only by his creativity and theft. The diagram behind me shows the flow of funds for a non-existent project called Omni Green. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw people checking their phones, perhaps checking their own investments. There is no Omni Green, I stated, slicing through the murmur. Omnicorp does not have a private equity division in the Cayman Islands. What we do have, however, is a paper trail. I clicked the remote again. A split screen appeared. On the left was a document signed by Julian Thorne. On the right was a digital analysis grid showing mismatching pixel density and stroke hesitation. Carter Vance has forged the signature of our CEO, Julian Thorne, exactly 15 times, I said. He used these forgeries to solicit capital from 12 different families. He promised them guaranteed returns. He promised them security. Instead, he took their life savings, totaling $3 million, and funneled it directly into this. I clicked the remote one more time. The screen filled with the logo of the Borgata Casino and a list of high-stakes betting slips. Sports betting, I read from the screen. Blackjack markers, and a lease on a Porsche that he claims the company paid for. Every single dollar raised for green energy was used to fund a gambling addiction and a lifestyle he could not afford. I lowered the laser pointer and looked directly at table 89. The spotlight followed my gaze. Pinning my family against the darkness, Carter was standing, his back to the closed doors, looking like a trapped rat. My parents were frozen, clutching each other, their faces pale masks of horror. They were looking at the screen, then at Carter, then at me. The cognitive dissonance was finally breaking. The numbers on the screen were too specific, too brutal to be a lie. He targeted strangers, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming softer but infinitely more dangerous. But his favorite targets were the people who trusted him most. He targeted the elderly. He targeted the naive. He targeted his own family. I pointed a finger directly at my father, Richard Blackwell. That man standing there is my father, I said. He worked in a steel mill for 40 years. He saved every penny to buy a house in Pennsylvania. Yesterday, Carter Vance convinced him to mortgage that house. He convinced him to wire his entire retirement fund, $500,000, into the Cayman account. My mother let out a sob that was audible even over the distance. She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Carter told them it was for a legacy, I said. He told them it was for their grandchildren, but the reality is, he needed that $500,000 to pay off a loan shark in Atlantic City who threatened to break his legs by Tuesday. Carter let out a strangled cry. That is a lie. She is lying. Julian, tell them. I ignored him. I looked at my father. Richard, I said, using his first name, stripping away the familial title because at this moment, I was not his daughter. I was his savior. You signed the wire transfer authorization this morning. You thought the money was gone. You thought you had invested in the future. I paused. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the projector. But you are lucky, I said. You have a daughter who sits on the board of directors. I flagged the transaction at the clearinghouse level. I froze the assets exactly 5 minutes before the wire was executed. My father looked up, tears streaming down his face. Hope, fragile and desperate, washed over him. Your money is not in the Cayman Islands. Dad, I said cold. It is in a holding escrow at J.P. Morgan Chase, awaiting my signature to be returned to your account. You still have your house. You still have your retirement. Carter's knees gave way. He stumbled back against the wall. The leverage he held over them, the financial ruin he had orchestrated, was gone. He had nothing left. However, I said, turning my attention back to Carter, the attempt to transfer the funds constitutes wire fraud. The forgery constitutes identity theft. And doing it all under the Omnicorp banner constitutes federal racketeering. I nodded to the side of the stage. Agent Miller? From the side exits. 6 figures in tactical vests emerged. They were not hotel security. They were FBI. The bold yellow letters on their jackets left no room for interpretation. Carter saw them. The instinct of the coward took over. He did not surrender. He did not apologize. He turned and ran. He shoved my mother's chair aside, sending it clattering to the floor. He sprinted toward the kitchen service doors, his coattails flapping, a desperate, pathetic dash for freedom. "Stop him," Julian Thorne said from his seat. He did not shout. He simply gave permission. A plainclothes officer, who had been posing as a waiter, stepped out from behind a pillar. He didn't even drop his tray. He simply extended a leg. Carter tripped. He hit the carpet with a sickening thud, sliding 5 feet before coming to a halt at the feet of the senator's wife. Before he could scramble up, 2 agents were on him, one knee to the back, one hand forcing his face into the floor. The click of handcuffs was sharp and definitive. "Get off me!" Carter screamed, his voice muffled by the carpet. "I am an executive. You cannot do this. Lorelei, call the lawyer. Tell them." I looked at Lorelei. My sister was standing alone in the middle of the chaos. She was not looking at her husband. She was looking at the screen. At the document that listed Lorelei Vance as the owner of the shell company. She realized it then. She realized that if I had not intervened, if I had not frozen the money and exposed the fraud, she would be the one in handcuffs. She realized that the man screaming on the floor had built a trap for her to fall into so he could escape. She did not scream for him. She did not run to him. She brought her hands up to her neck, ripping off the diamond necklace he had given her, bought with stolen money, and threw it on the floor. "You bastard," Lorelei whispered. It was not loud, but in the silence, it was a thunderclap. "You were going to let me go to jail." The agents hauled Carter to his feet. His nose was bleeding, staining his white shirt. His hair was wild. The facade of the successful businessman was gone, leaving only the grifter. They dragged him toward the exit, but I held up a hand. "Wait," I commanded. The agents stopped. They turned Carter to face the stage. I walked to the edge of the platform. I looked down at him. He looked up at me, his eyes full of hate and fear. "You said something yesterday." "Carter," I said, my voice conversational. "You said I was unemployed. You said I was a dreamer who did not understand the real world." I leaned forward on the railing. "You were right about one thing. I do not have a job. I do not punch a clock. I do not have a boss." I gestured to the room, to the board members, to the CEO, to the power that surrounded me. "My role is governance, Carter. My role is to decide who gets to play in this world and who gets removed from it. I am the gatekeeper. And you?" I smiled, cold and final. "You are just the trash I took out." I nodded to the agents. "Get him out of my sight." The agents shoved him forward. Carter began to weep, loud, ugly sobs that echoed as he was dragged through the double doors. The doors swung shut behind him, sealing his fate. I turned back to the room. The logo on the screen behind me switched back to the golden Omnicorp emblem. "My apologies for the melodrama," I said to the crowd. "Please, enjoy your dessert. The chocolate mousse is excellent." I walked off the stage and returned to my seat. Julian Thorne picked up his glass and raised it to me. "Ruthless," Julian murmured appreciatively. "Remind me never to make you angry." "Just pay the dividend, Julian," I said, picking up my water. "And we will be fine." The band struck up a lively jazz number, something upbeat and frivolous, that clashed violently with the scene that had just unfolded. The transition was jarring in its speed. One moment, a man was being dragged screaming across the Persian carpet by federal agents. The next, waiters in white gloves were circulating with trays of chocolate truffles and champagne, and the guests were returning to their conversations as if nothing had happened. This is the true face of the elite world I inhabit. Tragedy is merely an interruption to the service. Scandal is just a spicy topic to discuss over dessert. Carter Vance was already forgotten, reduced to an anecdote that would be retold at country clubs for a week and then discarded. The machine of Omnicorp ground on, indifferent to the human wreckage it left in its wake. I stood at the edge of the VIP platform, watching the room normalize. It was a masterclass in collective amnesia. But there was one corner of the room that could not return to normal. At table 89, 3 people stood huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. My parents, Richard and Mary, were clinging to each other, their faces gray and drained of blood. Lorelei stood slightly apart from them, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering despite the warmth of the room. They looked terrified. They looked small. They were out of place in this glittering room, stripped of the false status Carter had draped over them. They were waiting for me. I could see it in their eyes. They were waiting for the daughter and sister to come down from the high tower, to hug them, to tell them it was going to be all right, to drive them home and make them tea. They wanted the Isadora they knew, the fixer of small problems, the emotional sponge. I descended the stairs. I moved slowly, my black velvet dress absorbing the light. The crowd parted for me now, not with polite indifference, but with a wide, respectful berth. I was no longer the unknown woman in the corner. I was the sword of the board. I stopped 3 feet away from my family. I did not step into their circle. Isadora, my mother breathed, her voice cracking. She took a tentative step toward me, reaching out a hand. Oh, God, Isadora, we did not know. We truly did not know, my father added, his voice shaking. He looked aged, 10 years older than he had been this morning. He showed us papers. He seemed so sure. We thought we were doing the right thing for the family. He lied to us, Lorelei whispered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. He told me he was a director. He told me the offshore account was for tax reasons. Isadora, I swear, I thought I was signing insurance forms. I did not know he was putting the fraud in my name. They looked at me, pleading for absolution. They wanted me to say, I know. It is not your fault. You were victims. I looked at them. I looked at the fear in their eyes, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that remained was a cold, clinical assessment of their judgment. You did not know because you did not want to know, I said. My voice was calm, devoid of warmth. I told you the font was wrong. I told you the signature was forged. I told you the returns were impossible. You chose not to listen because his lie was more attractive than my truth. You preferred a son-in-law who promised you millions over a daughter who promised you reality. We were foolish. My father hung his head. We were blinded by greed. Please, Isadora, can you forgive us? Forgiveness is a religious concept, Richard, I said. I deal in assets and liabilities. I reached into my clutch. I pulled out a small, heavy card made of cream-colored stock. I held it out to my father. This is the card of Robert Sterling, I said. He is the best forensic attorney in Chicago. I have already paid his retainer fee of $50,000. My father took the card with trembling hands. Isadora, that is too much. He will handle the interview with the FBI tomorrow, I continued, ignoring his protest. He will unfreeze your funds at J.P. Morgan Chase and ensure the deed to the Pennsylvania house is returned to you clear of any liens. He will also represent Lorelei in the divorce proceedings and ensure she is cleared of any co-conspirator charges regarding the shell company. Thank you, Lorelei sobbed, covering her face. Thank you. Isadora, I don't know what to say. I am so sorry I called you jealous. I am so sorry. You do not need to say anything, I said. Mr. Sterling will handle all communication from this point forward. My mother looked up, confusion clouding her tear-stained face. Mr. Sterling? But what about you? Are you coming back to the hotel with us? We can check out early. We can all drive home together. We need to talk this out as a family. No, I said. The word hung in the air, final and sharp. I have a board meeting at 8 in the morning. I lied. I did not have a meeting. I had a spa appointment. And I do not think we have anything left to talk about. But you are our daughter, my mother whispered, the realization beginning to dawn on her. We are family. We were family yesterday, I said. Yesterday. You told me I was banned from Thanksgiving. You told me I was negative. You told me I was unwelcome because I tried to protect you. You made your choice. You chose the illusion. Now that the illusion is shattered, you cannot simply pivot back to me because it is convenient. I looked at Lorelei. You have your freedom. Lorelei, you have your innocence. Use it to find a job and a life that is actually yours. But do not look for me to cushion the fall. I took a step back. Do not call me, I said. Mr. Sterling will update you on the case. Goodbye. I turned my back on them. Isadora, my mother cried out, a sound of genuine heartbreak. Please, do not leave us like this. I did not stop. I did not look back. I walked away from the huddled, weeping group, moving back toward the light, back toward the power, back toward the only world that made sense to me. I ascended the steps to the VIP platform and sat down. A shadow fell over my table. Julian Thorne was standing there. He held 2 glasses of rare vintage cognac. He placed one in front of me and sat down, crossing his legs comfortably. He looked down at the scene below. Security was escorting my weeping family out of the ballroom, guiding them gently but firmly toward the side exit. That was cold, Julian observed. His tone was not critical. It was admiring. Most people would have hugged them. Most people would have played the hero. Heroes are for comic books, Julian, I said, picking up the cognac. I am an auditor. I balance the books. They were a liability. Now they are written off. Julian swirled his drink, the amber liquid catching the light. He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. The market just closed the after-hours session. Julian said, Omnicorp stock is up 4%. 4%, I repeated, swirling my own drink. That adds about $800 million to the market capitalization. The press release went out 10 minutes ago, Julian continued, a small smile playing on his lips. Title: Omnicorp Leadership Exposes Internal Corruption in Bold Move for Transparency. The analysts are eating it up. They are calling it a masterclass in corporate governance. They say it proves we are untouchable, that we police our own with iron discipline. He clinked his glass against mine. It went exactly as you predicted in your memo last week, Julian said. I took a sip of the cognac. It burned pleasantly. I told you, I said. The market does not hate scandal. The market hates uncertainty. By exposing Carter publicly, brutally, and swiftly, we proved we are in control. We turned a potential embezzlement disaster into a PR victory. Julian looked at me, his eyes sharp and assessing. You know, Isadora, there is one thing that I am still curious about. Only one? The timeline, Julian said. My security team did a deep dive on Carter's digital footprint after you flagged him. We found emails dating back 5 months. You knew he was running this Ponzi scheme in August. I didn't blink. Yes, I did. In August. He had only stolen $50,000, Julian noted. It was petty theft. If you had reported him then, we would have fired him quietly. No police, no FBI, no gala spectacle, and no 4% stock bump, I countered. Julian chuckled darkly. True, but also your parents. He looked at me intently. In August, he hadn't touched your parents' money yet, Julian said. You waited. You watched him for 5 months. You watched him steal from strangers. And you waited until he convinced your father to wire his entire life savings. You waited until the money actually left their account this morning. I did, I admitted. You let your parents face total financial ruin for 6 hours, Julian said. You let them feel the terror of losing everything. Why? I looked at the empty spot where table 89 had been. Because a slap on the wrist doesn't teach you anything. Julian, I said softly. My parents are good people, but they are weak. They are addicted to easy answers and shiny promises. If I had stopped Carter in August, they would have hated me. They would have believed I ruined a misunderstood genius out of jealousy. They would have bailed him out. They would have kept enabling him. I turned my gaze back to Julian. I needed the crime to be absolute, I explained. I needed the betrayal to be so complete, so devastating, that it burned the blindness out of them forever. I had to let them fall off the cliff so I could catch them at the bottom. It was the only way to save them from themselves. You traumatized them to save them, Julian summarized. I performed surgery, I corrected. It was painful, but the patient will survive. And more importantly, I gestured to the room filled with billionaires, to the ticker tape on the screen showing the rising stock price, to the empire we controlled. We made a profit, I said. My 2% stake increased in value by $12 million tonight. I would say that is a fair trade for my family's emotional distress. Julian laughed. It was a genuine laugh of delight. He shook his head. You are a monster, Isadora, he said affectionately. I am terrified of you. Good, I said. Fear keeps everyone honest. I stood up. The gala was winding down. The waiters were clearing the tables. The illusion was ending, but my reality was stronger than ever. I walked to the edge of the balcony one last time. I thought of my parents driving back to Pennsylvania in silence, broken and ashamed. I thought of Lorelei starting her life over with nothing but the clothes on her back. I thought of Carter sitting in a holding cell, realizing that he had tried to play checkers against a woman who was playing three-dimensional chess. I felt a moment of solitude, vast and cold as the ocean. I had cut the cord. I was untethered. I turned back to Julian, lifting my glass in a final toast. To family, I said, my voice steady and clear. To family? Julian raised an eyebrow. To family, I repeated, smiling with eyes that held no warmth, only the glitter of calculation. It is the greatest weakness a person can have, and tonight, Julian, I have surgically removed mine. I am finally free to do what needs to be done. We clinked glasses. The sound rang out like a bell tolling for the dead. I drank the expensive liquor, and it tasted like victory. Thank you for listening to this story of betrayal and cold-blooded revenge. If you enjoyed watching Carter get what he deserved, please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Do not forget to subscribe to the Sunday Drama Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people. See you in the next drama.